Today's webinar is on B2B sales in digital era. And we have Professor George John and Professor Madhu Viswanathan who will be conducting this webinar. Professor George John is a General Mills Chair in Marketing at the Carlson School of Management, University of Minnesota. He's a highly cited researcher in the economic business category of the Web of Science, and his research interests center on channel of distribution and sales force compensation. Specifically, he is interested in the strategic and efficiency aspects of governance choices in these settings. Professor John taught executive education programs, consulted with companies, and testified on these topics as an expert witness. He has earned his PhD from Northwestern University, MBA from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and BTech from IIT Madras. And Professor Madhu Viswanathan is an assistant professor of marketing at the Indian School of Business. Before joining ISB, he worked as an assistant professor at the University of Arizona. His research broadly focuses on B2B relationships, organization forms, distribution channels, and their effects on various marketing mix elements, such as prices and assortments. Professor Viswanathan uses different econometric and quantitative techniques to address questions in a variety of industries such as healthcare, technology, insurance, and grocery retail. His work was published in the Journal of Marketing Research, a premier journal in marketing. He has received his PhD from the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management and his BE from BITS Pilani. So welcome, Professor Madhu and Professor George. Over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Asta. Let me just make sure I'm not muted. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Prof, you're audible.
Excellent. Thanks, Asta. One thing that was left out in the introduction is that George is one of the two people who is also responsible for me being where I am as a professor and also, in the area that I am in. So George takes credit for that, and of course, all the brickbats too. Today, we're going to be talking about two areas that I really like. One is B2B sales, and the other part is the digitization aspect of it. And these are areas of interest / research for me, and I've been reading / doing some work in the space. And so I'll share some of the insights and things that I've learned here. George, of course, is an expert in this space, and he will give you more insights on what's going on. The way the webinar is structured, I will set up the first 20 minutes or so. I will set up the context. I'll give you the rosy picture of the world, though, given that we started with a digital interface where there was not a good start, you can imagine all the hiccups that most people face. But anyway, so I will give you the rosy picture of the digital world. And then, we will set up a mini case to illustrate the challenges and the pressure points in this setup. Now, we have given enough time for question and answers. So at the end of the session, around 15 to 20 minutes, the last 15 to 20 minutes, we will take questions from the audience on things related to this topic. All right. So with that, let me get started. Digitization in sales is not necessarily new. The digital era started a while ago, and the B2C interface has been seeing that for a while. But almost a decade now, we've been seeing digital enter the B2B space as well. And most of that has been investments in CRM and MIS technology, and a lot of it is to improve transparency and getting an idea of sales performance, figuring out where you are on the sales funnel, and trying to improve those things. A lot of this required tremendous input from salespeople and the stakeholders in it. And given the work involved, the adoption was pretty low. Salespeople don't like entering things on computers or any kind of documents. And so when they were forced to do this, there's a lot of pushback that you saw in the organizations. But I think now, after more than a decade or so of digitization, we are finally at that stage where both the technologies and the ideas behind digitization are mature enough that we can take advantage and leverage them in a better way. So some of the successes in this space have been based on improvements in customer interaction, uh, enabling sales performance. And so both these factors have been touted as successes. And the factors that have led to this success, of course, one is having a very clearly defined use case, letting all the stakeholders know exactly what is the outcome, how has it been achieved, and what you intend to do. That has been identified as one of the factors that leads to a success of digitization. The other part, and which is crucial, is that sales reps' needs should be at the center of this drive. And the reason for that is, at the end of the day, we are hoping to improve slash enable salespeople performance, make things better. And if the sales reps' needs are not at the center, you're going to see a lot of pushback and low adoption there. So for digitization to be successful, one needs to start incorporating the sales reps' needs at the center of this. The other part is also agile development, which basically means that you have to keep repeating successes and keep showing how this happens. And the last part, which is also another factor for success, is to identify the impact first, like figure out what is the impact that you hope to achieve by taking on this digitization. Then the actions associated with that digitization, and then proceed to we'll figure out the data and the technology and everything else that you need to achieve that. So it's a very top-down approach that can lead to success. So if you look at what has happened in the sales approach as such, you see something like an omni-channel sales approach. And to contrast this, one can think about the old, not old basically, but what people traditionally do is something like a multi-channel sales approach, where you approach different clients and using different ways. So you have key account manager, you have a face-to-face sales peer person, and then you have a telemarketing or a tele-sales person. All of those multi-channel approaches are there, but they used to be kind of independent of each other. What is happening in today's sales approach is there's a lot of overlap between them, especially at the lower levels. And what I mean by lower levels is a growth in inbound sales teams. And a lot of these inbound sales teams are going to help set up the customer. So give them all the knowledge parameters that they're looking for, materials, YouTube links, initiating first contact, working on the leads. A lot of that is happening at the inbound sales team. And then a lot of customers now also prefer online sales where there's less face-to-face interaction. This can be for new customers, a very small subset of them right now. But also, your old customers where it's a repeat order and then you just need to click it. And so they prefer online sales portals. Now, if you go beyond that, of course, there are, of course, resellers. Some people prefer resellers. And then you have the outbound sales team. So, you work, they require face-to-face interactions. And of course, for the bigger clients, you have key account managers, specialists, and sponsors who take care of their needs. And so what you see here is an additional layer put onto your traditional sales channels, where inbound and web sales are ensuring that you are aware of what the customer needs at all points in time. So if you think about key benefits of digitization, right? So the first thing that people always talk about is integration with marketing, right? The CRM technologies, knowing what kind of questions were asked in the previous meeting, having answers ready for them, going with a list of queries answered, showing them the products that they would like, showing how products get integrated, and of course providing pricing solutions that is customized to them can all be enabled with technology. And this is definitely one of the benefits of digitization. And a lot of firms are doing that now. Now, if you think about insights, clearly, you can think about prospecting insights. There was a marketing report by done by Google and Roland Berger on salespeople in Germany, and what they find is that 57% of the customers know what they're looking for before they even contact a sales rep, right? So that is one thing that is happening now. So customers are looking out for that. So identifying what the customer knows and then figuring out what kind of a customer he is very important. So, another factor that is thrown out is, 61% of most people seem to think LinkedIn is a good source of information. Then Facebook follows pretty closely, around 60%. And the idea behind that is just by following a prospective client, either on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter, you can get to know a lot more about what their interests are, what they're looking for, and finding out their intent. So you can do a lot of those insights nowadays. You can also figure out what competition is doing. So there are a lot of these useful insights that can be generated by digitization. So one of the things that I like to think about from an analytics perspective is, if you think about car sales, right? Each dealer a lot of times has a lot of decision to make on what kind of cars to stock, how much, and what price to sell. And usually they act independently of the manufacturer. And one thing that you can utilize analytics for is to basically identify best practices among dealers, show dashboards on what works, what kind of product configuration and portfolios would work well in these settings. And so this is one obvious benefit of digitization. The third thing that I like to talk about is buying process. And this is a very customer focused approach to digitization, right? So today's customers want to know more, but at the same time, they don't want to engage with a salesperson all the time. They do appreciate human interaction, but not all the time. So, part of the process is to figuring out when the customer requires a human interface versus when are they satisfied with just doing their own research. So, product comparison sites, price comparison tools, again, product configuration tools, all of these are very useful to let the customer experiment and figure things out on their own. Um, Once again, social media has been a big source of information. So, firms that listen to the customer on these sites are actually gaining more insight about what the customer is. You can even find out intents of customers nowadays. In addition, it also helps with ease of transactions. Like I said, nowadays speed is the essence. If it's a repeat order, they don't expect you to pull up everything from scratch and make it onerous. All you have to do is click off a button, the repurchase order must be there. So all of that is going on, and that's clearly a benefit of digitization. So some examples that I have encountered, one is analytics for lead qualification and scoring. So people are nowadays using attribution models to figure out what kind of channels work efficiently and what kind of leads are good, like what works for each individual and how should they target them. Okay, and then you have scoring metrics, which tells you which particular channel is most effective in that. There are quite a lot of firms who are into the space who do this. Um, the other thing, and this is more recent, I came across this firm more recently, is on salesperson training. And there's a lot of use cases which talk about how salesperson training can be empowered through digital. So one is clearly using video coaching to tell people what to talk, how to communicate. You can also highlight value propositions on these to the salespeople. Additional things that that people are using, a lot of it is spilling over from the B2C domain, is of course gamification and visualization analytics, right? So showing salespeople that here is what you should be doing, and this is where you're going to get the best return for your effort is very useful. And salespeople usually are smart enough to understand where the money is and what they should do. So once you make it easier with these visualization analytics, they're actually pretty fast to grab these opportunities. So these are some of the examples. Of course, now this is much more of a rosy picture. It says here are the benefits, everybody should do it. But of course, not everybody is adapting it. And even if you adapt, there are going to be a lot of challenges to this. Now, some of the, to illustrate the challenges, I'm actually going to take the help of George. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a mini case, and then I'm going to let George then talk about these challenges that he sees in these domains, right? So the mini case, what we have is a Fortune 100 company. It's a diversified manufacturer of industrial consumables. So think about it in terms of maintenance, repair, and operation supplies. They have more than 30,000 plus SKUs, and these SKUs are distributed over 7 business divisions of this OEM or this firm. Now, the key idea here is they have 2 marketing channels. Their biggest one is, of course, the offline distributor. So they are still the biggest customer for the OEM. It's a multi-channel distributor. So the offline distributor is a multi-channel person. So they sell through catalogs, stores. They also have an outbound sales force, and they also have a small web presence, which accounts for 10% of sales. In addition to this channel, okay, there's an online distributor also who happens to be the largest online distributor in the country. And so you have 2 separate marketing channels that this firm is involved with. Okay? Now, if you look at the similarities and differences in their marketing program, a lot of factors which are very similar. Okay, so if you look at the offline distributor and the online distributor in terms of payment terms, both of them get net 30%. Returns allowance is 0 for the offline, 1% for the online distributor, so not much of a difference. If you look at the market development and subsidy funds, once again, very comparable. So 3% for the offline distributor and 4% for the online distributor. And if you look at the purchase growth rebate, once again, it's almost no difference, right? So 1% for a 10% growth for the offline, whereas it's 0% for the online, but very negligible. Now, the big differences, of course, is in the volume rebate. So the offline distributor gets 4% of a volume discount, whereas the online distributor gets nothing. Right? So what I'm going to ask George is to answer these 2 big questions. Okay, the first one is, how can the firm do better? And after that, we're going to move on to what are the challenges that George sees in implementing this setup. So those are the 2 questions we're going to focus on. So George, over to you if you're ready.
I'm ready. So can you guys hear me? Just do this, Madhu, if I'm clear.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Fantastic. I'm 7,000 miles away, 6,000 miles away. I forget my IIT geography, the Earth being round and all that. Okay. So Madhu, can we go back to that summary slide of the differences?
There you go.
Thanks. Leave it on that. So I just want to reiterate a couple of things that Madhu pointed out. These are 2 big companies. I should say 3. You have this large manufacturer, which has tens of thousands of items going through its largest traditional distributor. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. And then along comes this online distributor, and their products are actually getting sold online without their permission. So this was their first official move to create an official relationship with this this largest online distributor in the world, literally. And you can see that they came to some conclusions. The big conclusion, of course, was that they felt they did not have to give volume discounts to the online distributor. And I think Madhu's question is, if I had to restate it, is asking me, what would I say about that? Is that something done pretty well along with what we know, how things work, or have they taken a step beyond what we know and done something really silly? Or who knows? So let's try and see if this something works. Let's try everything. So, again, a little background here. You know, channels and sales decisions, especially when big numbers involved, always involves a lot of fear and greed. They're afraid that they'll do something wrong and lose sales. But at the same time, they don't want to give away their margins. All of you working in industry know your margins are hugely competitive. So you're caught between this sort of fear and greed. So when I look at something like this, I first ask the question, what are we trying to do with each of these things? What are we trying to do with payment terms? Well, we want them to pay early. So that obviously is a financial question with interest rates and all of that. So we'll just put that aside. Returns allowances, I'm not going to get into detail of each of these things because returns allowances are a little bit country specific and it'll be of less interest. The reasons for returns are different in different places. If you look at market development funds, you want this person to do something specific. So as long as you can say what that specific thing is, you wouldn't expect any great strategy question here. So for example, the specifics that you would probably want the online guy to do is to have a better web interface and pay for part of that. In fact, that's what they do. As to offline, it's a little tricky. Sometimes you give them extra money for selling certain products. You might call that spiffs, things like that. But at any rate, these are funds intended to help the distributor do something today where the return is tomorrow. So you're trying to share the risk with that guy. So that brings us back to the rebate structures. So why would the rebate structures be so fundamentally different? Here, I'm going to throw a little theory at you. Why do we ever give anybody any kind of a rebate? It turns out there's a very simple reason. There's always a conflict between a manufacturer and a distributor in the following sense. If you work for a distributor, you know your margin is much smaller than a manufacturer. If you work for a manufacturer, you're glad because your margin is much larger than distributor. So generally speaking, what you find is that the manufacturer wants to sell the stuff at a lower price at retail, and the distributor, on the other hand, would like to raise that price because he always feels his margin's not enough. We can solve this mathematically, there are fancy words for it, but a small illustration of this is, I'd ask you to think about the retail maximum price program in India. Notice, if my logic is correct, that actually is something manufacturers are quite happy with. The people who would be unhappy with that would be the distributors, because they're caught between that maximum price that the manufacturer wants, which is typically going to be lower than what the distributor wants. So my reaction to this 4% versus 0%, and Madhu can obviously say it's wrong, is a simple one. For whatever reason we believe that, or this company believes that the prices that the offline guy charges are likely to be in greater conflict than the price I would like them to charge. Therefore, I'm trying to give them an incentive to lower their price by saying, hey, if you sell more or you buy more, I lower your price to you. So you can see that provides people an incentive to move more volume at lower prices. Now, we might ask, why wouldn't the online person face the same pressures? What's different? So if you go back through the purchase journey and the other things that Madhu pointed out, let's stop and think about it. What's the classic thing about online? Your competitor is just a mouse click away. So there's an awful lot more competition online, which holds down the ability of any online distributor to price higher than what the market will bear. And the market is a much more global market, much more competitive market than your own little area where you're the only wholesaler in town, and you can pretty much act ignoring the competition from far away. So, to my mind, that's the biggest single reason I see. I may be entirely wrong. We can discuss this. To briefly answer Madhu's second question, which is related to the first, the challenge is, can we do better? And in my mind, we can do better by making sure that the prices at which these folks move their product is getting closer to the price you desire. In other words, is your program having the desired effect? So if you see that the online guy and the offline person are selling at pretty much the same price, you know it's not working. Okay, we can get into the reasons later. So the challenge then is to coordinate both these approaches, to know what you want from the online person, to know what you want from the offline person, and to make sure that your tools are aligned with those particular goals that you have for each of these folks. And they may be different. The goals may be different. And I think I'll stop there.
So, John, so if I understand what you're saying, right? So pricing pressures for online is much higher. So competition will take care of the pricing pressure, and so you don't really need to give a quantity discount or a volume discount to lower that price. And at the same time, you really don't need these online guy to invest in any kind of market building activities either. So those are the two reasons why. First, the volume rebate is because competition takes care of the pricing pressure, and the second part is that you're going to incentivize investment only if you want him to do something, and really he doesn't need to do any of that. Is that
yeah, I think I'd modify that second point. I think the big challenge, and that's why I said the two questions are related, is how do you get online people who are very transaction focused? Think about all the analytics. It's always about the next sale. Who I bought shoes, therefore am I going to buy socks tomorrow? How do you actually get them to focus on the longer run purchase cycle in B2B? How do you get them to focus on the different stages of the funnel? How do you get them to focus on after sales service? So there's a lot of elements that actually are involved in market development online. And I think one of the biggest challenges is to get them to move away from that very well focused transaction perspective they have, because they have all this data, and usually all the data is incredibly valuable when you have a shorter horizon. The data become kind of worthless over the longer horizon. So that's the biggest challenge. How do you actually get the online people to stay focused on the longer run, while you get the offline people to actually move volume as well, and not just build up relationships?
So, George, this is related to what you've been talking about, and I was in a conversation recently with a big manufacturer, a retailer, who is both again in the offline and the online thing. And on the online space, one of the things they have is vendor managed inventory. So essentially, the retailer is not stocking any of the products, and all these products are being sent from the manufacturer directly to the customer. Now, one of the things, and they're still trying to understand that, is the impact of shipping fees on these on the final price. So because it's vendor managed inventory, they have to negotiate with the manufacturer, not only on the cost of the product, but now again on the delivery charges also. So I think that would be an example of some of the coordination activities you're talking about, right?
Right. And if I can add one more item to that, I think what happens a lot of times that people never have a frank discussion about why we're trying to do something. So take vendor managed inventories. What is the supposed purpose of vendor managed inventories? And don't tell me it's just saving them money because they don't have to carry inventory, because somebody's got to carry the inventories. Okay, so moving money out of one pocket to another pocket is an honorable thing to do, but it's not going to create any more extra sales at the end of the day. So we have to always be very disciplined about knowing, why am I doing something? Because then we can go out and get the metrics to see if in fact it's happening. If vendor managed inventories is supposed to do something, and there's a temptation to say, oh, it's intended to increase sales. Well, there are lots of ways in which we increase sales. So we need to lay out the steps, the intermediate steps by which vendor managed inventories are supposed to eventually lead to higher sales. Okay, then we're in a good position to know what metrics we want to use and so on and so forth. I will point out, for example, this focus on transactions online, when you commented that they were talking about shipping charges. So shipping charges per transaction are about as transaction oriented as you can get. And you know how people obsess about free shipping online. And they fail to comprehend the fact that you've got a number of transactions over a certain period of time in B2B, and you have to get your focus off that immediate transaction.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, George. I think we are right around the point in time where we can solicit questions from the audience. So, Asta, are there any questions from the audience?
Yes, Prof. So one question that I have received, Prof, is that how, which is right now a very timed question, is that how is the sales process going to change among with the social distancing and online thing going on, and so how is the process going to evolve? What is it that salespeople should do differently now?
George, you want to take a crack at it first?
Sure. This is conjecture on my part, but I think the really big challenge is getting new business. So if you look at B2B sales, a typical horizon of 18 months from first contact to final contract is not uncommon, and even for consumables and stuff like that, because you have master contracts and so on and so forth. And if you investigate the steps, you can routinize the back ends. Okay, the reorders, the shipping, all of those things. What is very hard to automate and routinize is the front end. And the front end is much more haphazard. It's a much more person to person. It's those are the places where the natural tendency to automate, to routinize, to be programmatic doesn't help you as much. So I would say pay attention to the people. There's an expression in the Salesforce area, we call them hunters and farmers. The farmers are okay with social distancing. The hunters are not. Those are the people who need extra help and extra resources thrown at them for new accounts.
So, George, just to add to what you've said, the thing that you do see and what I think will happen is an acceleration on the digitization front. So, I think a lot of firms before were hesitant on the digitization aspect. Even these routine making transactional things more digital. A lot of firms were unsure about the investment, but I see going forward, a lot of investment will happen. And like I said, there's lots of studies which say that today's customer, when they come to you, 57% of the research is already done before they even contact a sales rep. And so you're going to see this growth in inbound sales teams, which are going to track the customer, find out their intent, and then try to engage with them in ways that are not necessarily face to face. So sending them material, finding out what they've discussed, doing the research in the background, sending it to them. Like I said, the human interface comes in much later, and it's going to be more valuable, right? So human interface is more valuable now. And so people are going to make sure that it is used in the most optimal way. And that's how I see things evolving.
I completely agree with just one small addition. I'm not always certain that these are complete substitutes for each other. I think sometimes they're complements. And part of the challenge is to know when they're complements and when they're substitutes, which is a very difficult question because that's an internal question and an outside question as well. How does the customer see them, and how do our internal reps and our external field reps see them also? And sometimes the customers may see them as complements, but the internal people may see them as substitutes, or the other way around, and that can cause coordination problems as well. So I pay attention to the inside and the outside.
I think it's a great point. I think, in fact, the firms should see them as complements if they want it to be a really successful program, right? Um, enabling salespeople and trying to figure out new roles as opposed to thinking them as substitutes and taking away their existing things. Of course, incentive packages and all of that will change going to the future.
So I'll share one little bit of data. There are a few research studies coming out where you look at digitally native companies that were only online and then see what happens when they add an offline channel. Sales growth is amazing. I mean, Warby Parker had a 17% growth in sales when they added one store in Boston. Okay, they were only online. They sell glasses online and eyeglasses. And that's not an anomaly. I see this in grocery stores. I see this in other data as well, where the online only person adding offline. We are traditionally used to thinking of the offline person adding online, but now we've got enough experience. You can see that complementarity going both ways.
Right.
Thank you, Prof. This is a question to Professor George. You mentioned about the need for B2B customers to focus more on the larger cycle. Do you see more industry-specific online retailer cropping up, example, in medical sector, or will the B2C's biggies entry adapt to B2B needs?
Okay, so this is the fear of every B2B traditional distributor. They all know the online B2C, and let's just call it Amazon. It's the fear of Amazon. They're all afraid that if a big B2C person just sets up Amazon actually has a B2B platform, by the way, Amazon Business. Okay, that's their greatest fear. The evidence I've seen suggests that that fear is actually a little bit overblown. Meaning, yes, things are going to get more competitive, but as long as there's a reason why your core customers come to you, you can manage it. The danger is you try to mimic what Amazon offers, or you try to do exactly what they're doing. That's a recipe for disaster. If there's no reason why people are coming to you, then there's no reason why they wouldn't go to Amazon anyway.
Sure, Prof. So basically differentiating yourself from Amazon is the key.
Yes, but it's not just differentiation for the sake of differentiation. You've got to ask yourself, what can I bring to this business that they might find a little harder? This pandemic actually provides an interesting little point. In my town, the largest online people were the first to feel the stress because they have these large volumes of customers. So one number to keep in mind, 55% of all product searches today across businesses and industries start, guess where, at Amazon. So they're in everybody's consideration set. So that means when there's extra demand, they're the ones who feel the supply crunch first. So in my town, for example, the small grocery stores were able to keep up with online demand better than the Amazons of the world could. So there's a bit of a paradox there that when you get demand shocks, they're the people who feel it first. And they're the people whose supply resilience can crumble first because it's more unwieldy for them. So there are some advantages of being small and specialized as well. So if you're a specialized medical distributor, sure, you worry about the multi-industry giants, but there are things that you know how to do that they don't know how to do. And that's what you have to focus on.
Thank you, Prof. That was insightful. The next question is from Gaurav, who's asking that in effective B2B sales strategy, is it supposed to be customer focused or more product focused?
George?
Well, Madhu, you want to take that?
Well,
Because I know what I'd say, but
well, I would say it has to be focused on both. Like, why would you not focus on both? Um, but I think from a marketing thing, I'm hoping that the product is based on what the customer needs, and so
yes.
the customer should be the primary focus. And then the product, of course, is aligned to what the customer needs. Um,
So, so I just add a couple of points. So in B2B, you have to be very careful about who your customer is. You've got multiple people. You got the purchasing agent. That guy just wants a lower price. He doesn't care. Okay, as long as it meets the minimum threshold and it doesn't fall apart when they open the box, he's okay. He's happy because he's probably evaluated what percentage discount he got. Right? The engineer on the shop floor doesn't want that valve to blow up. He doesn't care if you paid 30% more for a German valve. He doesn't even want to see an Italian valve. Okay. Then the assembler probably has an affinity towards a brand that he's used for years and years and years, and now he gets all mad because the company decided with vendor managed inventory his favorite brand is no longer there. So the danger in B2B is always, and I've seen this a lot of times, somebody does a great big marketing study and they average these people. They take, oh, the purchasing manager really wants price, the engineer really wants performance, and the assembly line worker really wants convenience, let's just say. So what happens is they average these things and you build a product that really appeals to no one. It's everybody's second or third choice. I've seen this many, many times, and the more marketing research you do, the more you fall into the trap. So you need to de-average that.
So you have to basically come up with a best product that suits everybody's need. Isn't that a huge ask?
Yes. So what you really have to do is make sure your product is actually the preferred product for at least one of those significant people. For example, in the US, there are lots of small tool manufacturers. Okay, Snap-on Tools is an example. Their tools appeal to the person, the mechanic on the floor. They are priced a little bit higher, not so much that the purchasing agent says, no, we don't want these tools. But their core constituency is that person on the floor. Another example, 3M has a division that makes stethoscopes. Okay? And their stethoscope brand is called Littmann, Littmann. And nurses love Littmann. When a nurse gets a degree and a family gives a scope as a graduation present, she wants a Littmann. Because 3M has been spending decades getting the brand preference of Littmann in the nurse's eyes. They support a lot of nursing activities and they do all kinds of things. So you have to make sure you at least appeal to one important constituency before you start appealing to the others.
Thank you, Prof. That was that is an excellent point wherein we are saying that you have to get your core customer right. And for that core customer, your product has to be the first choice. And then you can average out maybe on your second or third level of customer. But for your core customer, your product has to be the first choice. Thank you, Prof. The next question is from Sanal. B2B sales, wherein for a fast-moving industrial SKU, I'm looking to blend in office plus online distributor, integrating the digital platform. Can we have your thoughts or views on it?
Madhu, that's your bailiwick.
Sorry,
Go for
Asta,
it.
can you repeat that?
Sure, Prof. So, B2B sales, wherein for a fast-moving industrial SKU, I'm looking to blend in office online plus offline distributor, integrating the digital platform. So, can we have your thoughts or views on it?
So, thoughts as in what is the issue in integrating? Are there any issues on integrating or?
I guess, yes, Prof.
Okay. George, what did you understand on this?
Yeah, so I'm going to make a few assumptions. I think the question is as follows, and correct me if you get a chance to re-ask if I'm wrong. I think the question is, you have a fast-moving SKU. Let's say you have ballpoint pens, and you can sell ballpoint pens through a contract. You ship 3 cases to an office store, and the office store sells it one at a time. And you also have a website where you sell it and ship it directly to the customer. And then the question is, how do you coordinate these two? I think sometimes we get too clever for ourselves. I say, to quote Mao Zedong, let 1,000 flowers bloom. If it's a fast-moving SKU, you can rely on market feedback to fine-tune it. I wouldn't try and strategize too much at the front end. I'd learn from experience. If you have a SKU with a much longer purchase cycle, that's a different matter. If, for example, we're selling ink cartridges that go into an industrial size printer, even though that's a fast-moving SKU, it has a different character to it because it's an add-on to the printer sale, and you have to coordinate that. So if it's a standalone fast-moving SKU, I'd say let it rip and see what happens and make adjustments as you go along.
Right, there's no coordination involved here, right?
Sure, Prof. That is all the questions that we had from our participants. So I would like to thank both Professor Madhu and Professor George for a very insightful session. I'm sure everybody who had joined this webinar had lots to learn. Thank you so much, professors.
Thank you, Asta. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.